What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. I gotta run right quick for a dentist appointment, but before I do that, fight gloves are on. UFC on FX5 goes down, I believe, tomorrow. I think it's a Friday fight card. It's one of the rare Friday ones. And we are going to talk about the fights right quick before I go and get my mouth hacked at by some insane dentist. So we're going to start on the prelim card. Starting in the welterweight division, we have Aaron Simpson taking on Mike Pierce. Aaron Simpson, 12-3 on his career, 7-3 in the UFC, so quite a bit of UFC experience. He decisioned Kenny Robertson in his last fight. Aaron Simpson, former Div 1 wrestler, but he's got 6 of his 12 pro wins coming by way of knockout. But his last 5 wins and his last 2 losses have all been by decision, so had a bit of a pedigree as a finisher earlier in his career, becoming more of a UFC style, maybe decision, maybe even a little bit of a points fighter in his last most recent fights. Mike Pierce, 14-5 in his pro career. He is 6-3 inside the octagon, so he has quite a bit of experience as well. Decisioned Carlos Roca in his last fight. Mike Pierce has losses to relatively high-level competition recently. Recent losses to Johnny Hendricks and Josh Koscheck. I think he's 2-2 in his last 4 fights, so he's kind of been hit and miss lately. Another former Div 1 wrestler with half of his wins, 7 of 14, coming by way of decision. I think ultimately, again, based on Simpson's recent track record and Pierce's track record, this is probably a fight that's going to go all 3 rounds. I think I'm going to take Mike Pierce in this fight. I think the caliber of competition that Pierce has faced in the past is slightly higher than Simpson's is, and with similar wrestling backgrounds and similar styles, I would argue, I'll take Pierce having faced better competition by way of unanimous judges' decision. Moving down to the lightweights, we have Marcus Levasseur taking on Carlo Prater. Levasseur, 21-6 on his pro career, very good record. Lost his octagon debut being subbed by Cody McKenzie-Teen. He's finished 17 of his 21 professional wins, but he has been finished in all 6 of his losses, 3 by knockout, 3 by submission. Carlo Prater, 30-11-1 on his pro career, but only 2 UFC fights in which he is 1-1. He was decisioned last by TJ Grant, and TJ Grant's on a bit of a roll. Half of his wins, 15 of the 30, have come by way of submission. Carlo Prater, everyone knows Carlo Prater has a great ground game. He also has 11 decision wins. He's got a very good record when it comes to decisions. And prior to making his UFC debut, he was on a 4-fight submission win streak, so his ground game definitely evident in his recent fights, and I think that's where this thing is going to end up. I think Prater is going to find a way to get Levasseur to the ground, and once he gets him to the ground, I think he's going to keep him there. I'm actually picking Prater to finish Marcus Levasseur by submission in the 2nd round. Moving all the way down to the flyweights, we have Darren Uwanayama, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, taking on Phil Harris. Uwanayama, 7-3 on his pro career. He won his octagon debut with an upset decision win over Kid Yamamoto. He has a 3-2 career record when the fight goes the distance to a decision. He has finished 4 of his 7 wins, 1 by knockout and 3 submissions. So he doesn't have the most knockout power in the world, but at least it's there a little bit. Phil Harris, 21-9-1 on his pro career, so definitely has more fight experience than Uwanayama, but he is making his UFC debut. Harris currently riding a 5-win streak in Bama, Cage Warriors, just other sort of 3rd-tier promotions, but still he's riding a 5-win streak, and you can't take that for granted. 13 of his 21 pro wins have come by way of submission, but he has been finished in 8 of his 9 career losses. I had to make sure I was still looking at the right page. I think just based on skill set here, like, yes, Harris has more fight experience. He's on a 5-fight win streak, but I think based on skill set here, this is Uwanayama's fight to lose. I don't expect that he's going to lose it. I think he's going to use his speed, use his effective striking, try to get this fight to the ground as well, and he will score a unanimous decision win over Phil Harris. Up to the featherweights. Bart Palashevsky taking on Diego Nunes. Palashevsky 36-15 on his pro career, so over 50 fights. But he's only 1-1 in the UFC, so only 2 of those fights have taken place on the big show. He was decisioned in his last fight by Hatsuhayoki. Since 2010, he's kind of been hit and miss. He's been, win one, lose one, win 2, lose 1, win 1, lose 2. He's been sort of all over the place since 2010. 11 of those 15 career losses have come by way of decision, which indicates to me a problem with wrestlers and grapplers. But 28 of his 36 professional wins have been finishes, so he does have the pedigree of a finisher. Diego Nunes, 17-3 on his pro career, and even 2-2 record inside the UFC. Was decisioned in his last fight by Dennis Seaver. His last 9 fights have all gone to decisions, in which he is 6-3 in those fights. And again, between 2004 and 2008, he ran a streak of 11 consecutive finishes, whether, for better or for worse, wins or losses. They all went to... Between 2004 and 2008, he had a streak of 11 straight finishes. That's what I was trying to say, not assuming finishes were decisions or something. I got myself confused, and I apologize to you good people. So, again, Nunes had... Again, another guy that had the pedigree of a finisher and is now sort of adapted to the UFC style of quote-unquote point fighting. And he's developing more of a decision game. Another one of these fights that I think comes down to skill set, and I think even though Palashevsky certainly has the experience edge, I think Nunes for sure has the edge in his skill set. Nunes takes this fight, unanimous judges' decision victory. Up to the lightweights, we have Jacob Volkmann taking on Shane Roller. Volkmann, 14-3 on his pro career. He is 5-3 inside the octagon, subbed in his last fight by Paul Sass. That loss against Paul Sass snapped a 5-decision win streak. 8 of Volkmann's 14 wins have come by way of decision. He's got 6 submissions. He has 0 knockouts. No knockout power whatsoever for Jacob Volkmann, which could very well be an issue in this fight. Shane Roller, 11-6 on his pro career, has a losing record of 2-3 inside the octagon. He decisioned John Alessio in his last fight. That decision win against Alessio snapped a 3-fight losing streak for Roller, so he got himself back into the positive with that one. 9 of his 11 pro wins have come by way of finishes. Got 3 knockouts, 6 submissions. And in 5 of his 6 losses, he has been finished. I don't think Roller needs to worry about getting knocked out here, because again, Volkmann has no knockout power whatsoever. He certainly has to worry about and respect Volkmann's grappling abilities. I don't think Roller's going to get finished, but at the same time, I don't see him winning this fight. I'm going to have to go with Jacob Volkmann. I'll take Volkmann by way of 3-round judge's decision. Still on the prelim card, and again at the lightweight division, we have Dennis Hallman taking on Thiago Tavares. Hallman, 51-14-2-1 on his pro career. A wealth of fighting experience for Hallman. Has a negative record of 4-5 in the UFC, but he submitted John Makdessi in his last fight. Hallman could be on the upswing. He's won 3 of his last 4 fights. A losing record of 6-8 in decisions, but 40 of his 51 wins have come by way of submission. He has also been knocked out in his career 6 times in those 14 losses, so might be a little susceptible to a guy with heavy hands. But in the fight with Tavares, Thiago Tavares, not exactly a heavy-handed fighter. Thiago Tavares, 17-4-1 on his pro career. He is 7-4-1 in the UFC, which means he came into the UFC an undefeated 10-0. Currently riding a 2-fight win streak over Sam Stout and Spencer Fisher. 11 of his 17 pro wins have come by way of submission, so he's more of a grappling-based fighter. 2 of his 4 losses have come by way of knockout, so half of his losses, he knows what it's like to be knocked out. I'm sure he doesn't like it. And when the fight goes to a decision, he is 4-2. Now, again, Tavares, not exactly the heaviest-handed fighter in the world. I like Dennis Hallman. I think this is going to come down to a bit of a grappling contest here, and I don't know that either of these guys has the ability to submit the other, given the grappling skills of their opponent. That being said, again, these are 2 guys that combined for 51 submission wins on their career. I think this fight's going to hit the ground early and often, but I expect Thiago Tavares is going to win this. I think at some point, Tavares, later on in the fight, when Hallman might be sort of slowing down a little bit, everyone knows, of course, about Hallman's, I believe it's Hallman that has sort of a regenerative condition that he finds it hard to sort of build himself back up after training and fighting and everything. I think the longer this fight goes, the more it's going to benefit Thiago Tavares. I'm going to take Thiago Tavares by TKO in the 3rd round. I think eventually when Hallman slows down, Tavares is going to catch him and pound him out on the ground. Sticking with the lightweights, Michael Johnson taking on Danny Last Call Castillo. Michael Johnson, 11-6 on his pro career, a winning record of 3-2 in the UFC. Is currently riding a 2-decision win streak against Tony Ferguson and Shane Roller. 5 of his 6 career losses have come by way of submission. He is 4-1 in decisions and currently trains with the Black Zillions. Last Call, 14-4 in his pro career, an impressive 4-1 record in the UFC. Adapting very well to UFC life, currently riding a 3-fight win streak over John Cholish, Anthony Njokuani, and Shamar Bailey. So no slouches for wins there. 9 of his 14 pro wins have come by way of finish. He's got 5 knockouts and 4 submissions. So he's a well-rounded fighter, certainly in terms of his finishes. Trains with Team Alpha Male, so you know he's working on that guillotine. I don't think he's going to catch Johnson in a guillotine, but I do think he's going to catch Johnson on his chin. Danny Castillo by knockout or technical knockout inside the 1st round. I think Castillo's going to catch him. He's going to lay hands on him. Johnson's not going to like it too much. He's going to try to take the fight to the ground. It's not going to work out. Bam, Castillo finishes this fight. The last fight on the prelim card, Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens taking on Yves Edwards. Stevens, 20-8 on his pro career, an even record of 7-7 inside the octagon. Currently riding a 2-decision loss streak, but against very high-level competition in Cowboy Cerrone and Showtime Pettis. 3-5 on his career in decisions, so he's got a negative record when the fight goes the distance. 14 of his 20 pro wins have come by way of knockout, and he has never lost 3 straight fights throughout his entire career. Yves Edwards definitely has the edge in experience. 41-18-1. So that's 60 pro fights for Yves Edwards. He was decisioned in his last fight by Tony Ferguson. 32 of his 41 pro wins have come by way of the finish. 15 knockouts, 17 submissions. Very well-rounded fighter. A losing record of 9-10 when the fight goes the distance. And I always like to mention that because it is the UFC. Fights tend to go the distance. I don't think Yves Edwards here has the stand-up skill set to knock out Jeremy Stevens. I think his only chance is going to be to take the fight to the ground. If Stevens can stay on his feet, which I think he's going to be able to do, I'm giving Stevens this fight by knockout or technical knockout inside the 3rd round. That takes us on to the main card. Starting in the welterweight division, we have Justin Edwards taking on the dentist Josh Neer. That's kind of ironic. Justin Edwards, 7-2 in his pro career, both of those losses coming in his 3 UFC fights. He was decisioned in his last fight by John McGuire. And in his last 3 fights have all gone to decisions, in which he has 1-2, those 3 fights in the UFC, after a 5 submission and 6 finish streak outside of the UFC. So he has finishing ability, but he may not have finishing ability at this level. Josh Neer, very experienced fighter, 45 pro fights, 33-11-1 in those fights, a losing record of 6-7 in a couple of stints in the UFC. He was knocked out in his last fight by Mike Pyle. 4-5 when the fight goes to a decision. 29 of his 33 pro wins have come by way of finishes then, obviously. He is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, fighting in the Pat Miletich martial arts camp. I gotta go Josh Neer all day on this. I think the experience factor, wondering whether Edwards has actual finishing ability at this level. Everything here to me points to a Josh Neer victory. That's who I'm going to take. Josh Neer by knockout or technical knockout in the second round. Moving back down to the flyweights, in what is likely a flyweight title eliminator, we have John Dodson taking on I think it's Husier de Silva, something like that. Anyways, Dodson versus de Silva. Dodson, 13-5 in his pro career, has won both of his UFC outings, currently riding a 4-fight win streak. All 5 of his career losses have come by way of decision, which could very well play into de Silva's hands. 7 of his 13 pro wins have been finishes. He is a black belt in Gaido Jitsu, which again is Greg Jackson's submission fighting style. Husier de Silva, 14-1 on his pro career, making his UFC debut. Currently riding a 5-fight win streak in organizations like Shudo, Tachi Palace Fights. So again, down in, third tier, basically, organizations. His only career loss comes to Uncle Creepy, Ian McCall. 7 submission wins, 7 decisions. De Silva, I think, is more than capable of scoring a decision win over an opponent in this division, but he's got to catch him first. John Dodson is an extremely elusive fighter, and I think, unfortunately, this is going to play right into the Jackson game plan of, well, I'm just going to sort of run around. So I'm actually taking Dodson here. I'm going to take Dodson by unanimous judge's decision in what's going to be, I think, a fast but relatively boring fight. Co-main event time, welterweight division, Jake Ellenberger taking on Jay Hieron, a late replacement, of course, for, I believe, Josh Koscheck. Ellenberger, 27-6 on his pro career, 6-2 in the UFC, so a very good record. He was knocked out in his last fight by Martin Kampmann, which snapped a 6-fight win streak. 17 of his 27 pro wins have come by way of knockout, even though by pedigree he is a wrestler. And 4 of his 6 losses on his career have come by way of decision, which again is sort of strange for I think he's a Div 2 wrestler, for a wrestler with a decent pedigree. Jay Hieron, 23-5 in his pro career, lost his only UFC appearance, and this is sort of back in the day. He subbed Romario da Silva in his last fight, which was in Legacy Fighting Championships. The big thing about Jay Hieron, he won the Season 4 welterweight tournament in Bellator, going all the way to fighting Ben Askren, and unfortunately, of course, lost that fight. But Hieron was very impressive in those Bellator fights. I ended up, after, I think, Ben Saunders got eliminated from that tournament, I was all about Hieron, and he did make it to the finals and win the tournament. That being said, one of the opponents that he beat on the way was Rick Hahn, but then, of course, he stepped up to someone like Ben Askren. Didn't work out so well. This is Jake Ellenberger. Jake Ellenberger is a high-talent, highly ranked welterweight. I don't see any way Hieron's going to win this fight. It'd be a major underdog story if he did. I got to go with the numbers. I got to take Jake Ellenberger. I think he's going to knock him out or TKO him inside of the first round. That takes us to our main event fight. Heavyweight division. Travis Hoffa Browne taking on Antonio Bigfoot Silva. Browne, an undefeated 13-0-1 on his pro career. 4-0-1 inside the UFC, currently riding a 3-fight win streak over Stefan Struve, Rob Broughton, and Chad Griggs since his draw with Czech Congo. 9 of his 13 pro wins have come by way of knockout, even though he is a Jackson submission fighter, so he's not, again, one of these guys is not the prototypical sort of Jackson fighter. Bigfoot Silva, 16-4 on his pro career, lost his UFC debut. Actually currently riding a 2-fight losing streak. But the 2-fight losing streak is against guys who are top 5 in the division. We're talking Daniel Cormier and Cain Velasquez. And these, again, those guys are probably top 5 in the heavyweight division. His last win, of course, was his victory over Fedor Emelianenko in the Strikeforce heavyweight tournament. Another guy that does UFC predictions here, Scotty with Kamikaze Overdrive. I remember him saying he's got, this is Bigfoot Silva. Bigfoot Silva has more belts than he has waists. Black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in Judo, and in Karate. He's finished 14 of his 16 opponents. And just like Scotty, I'm taking the underdog on this one. Travis Browne is considered the favorite going into this fight, again, based on being undefeated. But if you look at the two guys' track records side by side, Browne's only high-caliber win is that Stefan Struve knockout, which, again, was a great win and was a highlight reel knockout. But Bigfoot Silva has been fighting better competition for longer. I am taking Bigfoot Silva in this fight. I don't think it's going to make it to the 4th and 5th round, the main event rounds. But I think Bigfoot Silva is going to sort of drag this one out. If he gets Travis Browne to the ground, he's a damn tough guy to get off of you. So I got to take Bigfoot Silva. I'm going to take him by knockout or technical knockout inside the 3rd round. Those are the predictions. I'll go over them here with you one more time, and then I got to get the fuck out to get my teeth messed with. Welterweight, I have Mike Pierce decisioning Aaron Simpson. Lightweight, I have Carlo Prater submitting Marcus Levasseur in the 2nd round. Flyweight, I have Darren Uwanayama decisioning Phil Harris. Featherweight, I have Diego Nunez decisioning Bart Palashevsky. Lightweight, I have Jacob Volkman decisioning Shane Roller. Lightweight again, I have Thiago Tavares knocking out or TKOing Dennis Hallman in the 3rd round. Lightweight, I have Danny Castillo knocking out or TKOing Michael Johnson in the 1st round. And again at lightweight, I have Jeremy Stevens knocking out or TKOing Eve Edwards in the 3rd round. Main card, welterweight, I have Josh Neer knocking out or TKOing Justin Edwards in the 2nd round. Flyweights, I have John Dodson decisioning Hussier de Silva. Welterweight, co-main event, I have Jake Ellenberger knocking out or TKOing Jay Huron inside the 1st round. And the main event of the evening, I've got the underdog, Bigfoot Silva, knocking out or TKOing Travis Browne in the 3rd round. Those are my predictions. Want to see your fight picks in the comments below. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and pray for me that this dentist appointment goes okay.